Take two. If you already watched the original version of this video, I highly recommend you still stick around as I'm a lot more confident in the points I make this video. Also, the tone is a lot more lighthearted. Let's get to the chase. What's the situation? Why do I like Hoederer, but I don't like Ulpianus? Well, I don't not like Ulpianus. I do like him, just most of him. And it isn't for power level reasons, it isn't for character reasons, so before you think I'm attacking your precious squid daddy, I'm here to talk about my feelings when it comes to the design of the Crusher subclass. That's all I care about talking about right now. But before we talk about that, let's talk about a thing called subclass identity. Subclass identity is a term that I made up that describes the definition of a subclass. There are common themes that exist within a subclass that define the main use cases of that subclass. For example, the marksman subclass identity is defined by being cheap, having 3x4 range, having low attack but with rapid attack speed, prioritizing aerial targets, that kind of stuff. Subclass identity also lays out the core strengths and weaknesses of a subclass. The strengths of a marksman are their high attack speed, their large range, cheap cost, and the ability to prioritize aerial targets. The weaknesses of the marksman is their low attack, which makes them really hard to deal with medium to higher defense enemies. All marksmen do fall in line with these traits, but some may stretch the restrictions a bit for the sake of diversity. Marksmen deal physical damage normally, but blue poison does a bit of trickling arts damage. Marksmen are also typically more oriented for DPS, but you also have Meteor and May, who have a bit of crowd control on their end. Having spice within a subclass, or what I like to call a branching operator, is perfectly fine as long as they still follow the main rules for what makes a marksman a marksman. It's these rules that define the subclass identity as well as defines their general use cases. Marksmen are often used for DPS against low defense targets. If Hypergriff added a marksman that costed 21 DP and every attack dealt full arts damage, then it would be a marksman only in name. Yeah, maybe it prioritizes aerial enemies and has high attack speed, but in no way does it feel like a marksman. So what is the subclass identity for Crusher, since that's the main topic of this video? Well, to me, the main subclass identity for Crushers relies on four main things. Crushers have high attack and low attack speed. This gives them more emphasis on high instance damage rather than rapid attacks. This makes them really good at dealing with medium to high defense targets, even though they do physical damage. Crushers occasionally inflict stun, because greatswords are really big. Crushers have the best HP-based survivability in the game, but to compensate, Crushers have non-existent defense-based survivability. Okay, so the first 2 points make sense. If you have a Crusher with low attack but high attack speed, it's not really a Crusher anymore, is it? And if a Crusher doesn't inflict stun, well, it isn't the end of the world, but it kind of sucks. What about those last two? What is HP-based and defense-based survivability? Well, these terms actually come from one of the first talkie videos I ever uploaded to this channel, which was about defense. In that video, I described there to be two different kinds of survivability. HP-based survivability is when what keeps an operator alive is their HP. Defense-based survivability is when what keeps an operator alive is their defense. Despite being very similar, both Beagle and Cardigan have different survivability types. Cardigan's high HP, boosted by her talent and her regeneration skill, all help boost her HP-based survivability. Beagle, on the other hand, has less HP but more defense. Her talent and skill, like Cardi, emphasize this. Now, why is this important to differentiate? Well, because both provide two very clear benefits. The higher the defense of an operator, the more physical damage they can reduce. Obviously, this makes them good against your average enemies with moderate attack and attack speed. It can also shut down brawler-type enemies and spam by negating 95% of the damage taken via damage thresholding. Defense survivors can deal with heavy attackers, but usually the higher the defense, the lower the HP. The higher the HP of an operator, the more non-physical damage they can take, and generally the more damage they can take overall. Although less physical damage is being negated through defense, damage types like arts and true damage don't care about how much defense you have, meaning HP-based survivability is the only manner of properly dealing with it. HP-based survivors are a bit better at dealing with really heavy attackers, mainly since when an enemy only needs 1 to 2 hits to kill you, defense is less worth it as there are less attacks for defense to reduce the power of. Therefore, high HP can probably let you survive 1 to 2 more shots. I can go into further detail with math, but if you want those numbers, you can watch my video about Crushers. Oh, and speaking of, yes, this is what I mean when I say that Crushers have the best HP-based survivability in the game, but they have the worst defense-based survivability in the game, being non-existent, and this is intentional. Crushers commonly reach over 6,000 base HP, which is over 1,000 more than their nearest competitors, but to compensate for this insanely high HP value, they have non-existent defense. Crushers aren't glass cannons, they aren't wholly about dishing out damage and dying in 2 seconds. Crushers are defensive by nature, just in a way that people aren't very used to. This is often where their main criticism comes from, as most people are simply just used to having the defense stats on their guards. It's quite difficult to adapt to this whole new design of an operator. This doesn't mean that Crushers can't have defensive skills. Windchime's S2 is a good example of what a Crusher defensive skill could be. Windchimes grants herself a 40% Sanctuary. This reduces all physical and arts damage by 40%, which boosts her effective HP by about 67% for the skill duration. She's still vulnerable to spam and everything that having low defense-based survivability makes you vulnerable to, but she's now stronger against the things that having high HP-based survivability is good against. Crushers are great against arts damage or really heavy attackers, but suffer against spam. That is the core of the subclass's defensive design, and personally, there is nothing wrong with that. That's just what balancing is. And honestly, a huge reason why I love the Crusher subclass so much is because of that. Crushers thrive on having stats in both extremes. Crushers have the highest base attack in the game, but some of the lowest attack speed in the game. Crushers have the highest HP-based survivability in the game, but have the worst defense-based survivability. To me, this creates a really unique subclass that requires some creativity when using them. You have to figure out how to maximize their insane upsides while trying to minimize their insane downsides. Having that polarity is what makes the subclass so cool to me. So what about Ulpianus and Hoederer? Well, to me, my feelings on the operators don't come from their effectiveness or power or meta, clearly. It comes from design and intention. If an operator feels like a creative attempt to make something new and fresh for the game with loads of potential, I love it. But of course, the operator still needs to have an element of integrity to its design. A huge reason why I love Arknights over other gacha games is because the power creep is kept to a minimum, only prevalent in the occasional Meta Buster 6-star. This game is pretty well balanced for the most part, and there's never a moment where you're forced to fork over cash just to have a chance at beating content. So let's get back to the subject of this video, Hoederer and Ulpianus. Why do I love Hoederer but I don't really like Ulpianus? Well, when it comes to their skills, I think both are actually really cool and unique. Hoederer was the first 6-star Crusher, so his design is a bit more stale, I suppose. He's definitely the final evolution of Quartz and Windchimes, being an accumulation of experience and Hypergriff's part when it comes to designing what Crusher should be. And in every regard is Hoederer what a Crusher should be. Hoederer's S1 deals an insane 260% of attack as physical damage and heals him for 25% of his max HP. This helps both his high instance damage and keeps him alive. Every time Hoederer activates his S1, his effective HP increases by at most 25%, keeping him healthy and tanky. Hoederer's S2 gives him a flat 40% attack boost and a state switch skill. While this skill is active, his attack speed reduces, but he gains an extra block and guaranteed stun for 1 second. This plays into the Crusher's love for instance damage, which should be obvious, but also gives the infamous Crusher stun more consistency as a crowd control tool. Hoederer's S3 is just everything. Boost of HP-based survivability with the 45% HP increase and the 5% heal on every attack. Attack increase by 90% just makes him shred through defense even better than he already does, and of course, that classic Crusher stun. Every single one of his skills either helps with his defensive prowess in an HP-based way, increases his damage output through each instance of damage dealt as opposed to simply increasing attack speed, and he stuns. What else could you ask for? His talents are also pretty good. His S1 is alright. Him doing 10% more damage on every attack is funny, as it is kind of redundant. Attack increases to 110% when attacking an enemy. Oh my god, I'm so glad my allies are safe. They only have to worry about 100%. The main point being the increase in damage against stunned and bound enemies. Although he is likely to attack an enemy stunned by himself with his S3, the skill is more designed for flavor to be comboed with Innocent W. His second talent is awesome. Hoederer takes 21% less damage. But wait a minute, wouldn't this essentially make it resistance, thus going against the Crusher, having no base stats? Although, yes, it is technically as if Hoederer had 21 resistance, but for all damage types, it plays into the strengths of Crushers very well. Like I said with Windchimes, this effectively boosts Hoederer's HP by about 27%. The Crusher's main strength of HP-based survivability is preserved, while their main downside of poor defense-based survivability is also preserved. Having pseudo-resistance does not make him less vulnerable to spam and chip damage. It just means he's going to take maybe 1 to 2 more seconds for the horde of touches of the Sanguinarch to kill him. What truly matters isn't the existence of pseudo-stats, but whether or not Crushers remain without any form of defense-based survivability. Now, if you did have straight-up resistance as a base stat or a talent, I would be upset, but that's not what this is. This exists to increase effective HP and effective healing in general, not to make the subclass as a whole a super generalist. That's why I compliment Hypergriff's choice to choose Sanctuary. It's an appropriate way for the subclass to reduce damage without it defeating the point of the subclass. That effective healing part is also what I feel to be a very smart design decision. An issue the Crushers do genuinely face, and that I don't believe is an intended downside, is how difficult they are to heal. Most medics heal flat amounts, and those flat amounts are balanced around operators with only like 2,000 HP and 300 defense. Definitely not some behemoth with 6,000 HP and no way to mitigate damage at all. Except Hoederer. Having that bit of damage mitigation helps make Crushers easy to keep them alive with medics. I do genuinely believe this is an unintended design issue that Hypergriff wants to fix, since the Crusher modules do just that, boost their effective healing. And so all of these elements together shows to me a great understanding of Crushers as a subclass in Hypergriff's part, and their dedication to upholding that design integrity. People called Hoederer a bad unit on release because he still suffered from having poor defense-based survivability, but ultimately, that's just not the point of the subclass. Hypergriff made an operator excel at what Crushers already excel at while keeping that balance mechanism built into the operator. So what about Ulpianus? Well, his skills are honestly just as well designed as Hoederer's. They're very similar in function, but are still unique and make Ulpianus not only stand out, but gives him some varied use cases. His S1 is a Rope Master crit skill that pulls in 2 targets, dealing 270% of his attack as physical damage. Compared to Hoederer's S1, this skill is much more proactive. He brings the fight to him, possibly counteracting some potential ranged chip damage in the process. But even if the enemy is big and heavy, it's an auto-charge skill, meaning Ulpianus can deal some hefty damage to the target before the fight even begins. It forgoes a bit of Hoederer's healing, but instead gives Ulpianus a more proactive role that ends up saving him some HP by either killing the enemy before they can arrive or forcing combat. You can also use this as a Rope Master skill, and just pull things into holes if you really wanted to. His S2 is essentially just Hoederer's S2, but rather than being a state switch skill, it's an unlimited duration skill. He still gets an extra block and increased attack, but also gains some extra HP and doesn't have to worry about lowered attack speed at all. The main downside compared to Hoederer is that it gives you less control. Although Hoederer does have lower attack speed while the skill is active, you do get the 40% attack boost passively, and you do have more control over which state you want to use. Even though the attack boost is insanely higher than Hoederer's, the 70-second wait definitely seems like a proper balance between the two. Hoederer gives you more control, Ulpianus gives you more stats. Either way, the skill boosts what Crushers excel in. High instance damage, HP-based survivability, what's not to love? Finally, his S3 is admittedly really cool. Ulpianus gets an insane stat boost and yeets an anchor, doing 160% of attack as physical damage, doing that classic Crusher stun. If the tile lands on a deployable tile, he just fucking teleports over there and crushes whatever is next to him to death. If not, he'll wait a few seconds and then crush them to death. Boost to effective HP, boost to instance damage, cool proactive playstyle, love it, it's great. And so after all I've said, it seems both Hoederer and Ulpianus both fall into the realm of being great crushers. Both have unique designs and hold up their subclass's main identity very well. Except Ulpianus' first talent. Whenever Ulpianus takes damage, before damage, he heals 100 HP. When below 50%, this healing is boosted to 160. Now, what's wrong with this talent? Well, if Ulpianus takes 500 damage and he heals 100 HP, it's as if he only took 400 damage. This is flat damage reduction based on damage taken, which is exactly the same as defense. No, it isn't exactly the same, as it can be boosted by Neural or Vendella. It isn't susceptible to the 5% damage minimum and activates for any source of damage, even true damage. Now, Hoederer has a talent that reduces damage, so why is this any different? Well, it's the manner of reducing damage that I have a problem with. Hoederer's damage reduction is done in a way that stays true to the Crusher's high HP-based survivability. Ulpianus, on the other hand, now has added defense-based survivability. If you remember what I said earlier, a part of the Crusher subclass identity, at least to me, is defined by having the best HP-based survivability in the game and non-existent defense-based survivability. The complete lack of defense-based survivability is meant to be a downside that you must overcome in order to use Crushers. That's their balancing mechanism. And since Ulpianus doesn't have that downside, he's only upside. He's not only good against spam, he's also good against high instance damage and arts damage. This on top of Gladia's Abyssal Hunter buff makes him absurdly unkillable. Now, I'm not criticizing him because he's strong. I don't actually care about his power level. Just him being an Abyssal Hunter alone makes him overpowered. I'm criticizing him because the talent seems to exist to fix an issue with Crushers that isn't an issue. It's a balancing mechanism. To me, it's putting the design integrity of an entire subclass to the side for the sake of selling a product. And yeah, this isn't anything new, I understand that. But that doesn't excuse it. The reason why I'm talking about it for Ulpianus is because Crushers mean something special to me. It's the fact that Hypergriff is willing to take a risk to create such a funky and weird and fun subclass that makes Arknights fun and unique. It would be so easy to just make every operator only exist to stomp on stages and do billions of damage to everything every second, constantly pushing the power level of operators and stages, forcing players to buy into this shady and forced metagame. But it isn't. Only in Arknights can Crushers exist. Only in Arknights can something with 0 defense be awesome and fun. But at the same time, I also kinda understand the situation. I think Hypergriff was just in a weird place. I don't think they did it for malicious reasons. It feels like the only reason Ulpianus is a Crusher is because no other subclass can really feed into the sheer power that Ulpianus as a character is meant to fulfill. It's flavorful to him. At least I think. I don't know anything about him as a character. He has defense-based survivability because Hypergriff knows that people don't like Crushers. Crushers are bad because they die to spam and swarms. And so to make Ulpianus more desirable to those players, they fixed the issue with Crushers. HP-based survivability and defense-based survivability. Now there's no reason for him to fail. I don't hate Ulpianus, I kinda dislike him, yeah. He does some genuinely cool stuff. It's purely that first talent that bogs him down for me. He just simply wasn't designed for me, and that's just kind of it. I love Crushers because of that unique stat situation, and so using an operator who just kind of fixes that unique stat situation to be made less unique just isn't that fun for me. It's like giving Dreadnoughts a second block, or making Reapers able to hit air. It just adds more generic functionality that more exists to define an operator as good rather than as unique. I don't want to play Arknights with good operators. I made that very clear with this channel. I want to play Arknights with unique operators. I want my Crushers with no defense, because that's what makes them stand out. That's what makes playing with them so fun. It's that challenge, that spice, that element that makes them different from everyone else. And yes, it's also about upholding design integrity. Hypergriff established rules for themselves with Quartz, Wind Chimes, and Hoederer, but broke it with Ulpianus. Again, this isn't a video about why I think Ulpianus is too strong or too weak. It's not why I don't like his character, whether you should pull for him or not. It's just explaining why I don't like the way his first talent is designed. To me, the intentional design decisions that exist to balance an operator shouldn't be fixed. No, Flingers shouldn't hit air. Medics shouldn't be your main DPS, and Crushers shouldn't have defense-based survivability. The moment the definitions of what we hold dear are broken, the fabric of the game starts to falter. And yeah, it already has. And if you too disagree with it, I beg you to vote with your wallet. Or well, your Arundum. I love Arknights and I love Crushers, and I want to love Ulpianus so much, but it's really hard to ignore that first talent. And listen, if you love Ulpianus for whatever reason, I want you to continue loving him. Maybe you think he's still perfectly fine as a Crusher. Maybe you don't really care about Crushers and you just think his kit's fun. Maybe you just like him as a character. Believe me, if I could ignore his first talent, I would, but I don't really get that choice. Remember everyone, there are no bad operators, just operators you sadly wish were designed for you. Thank you all for watching, and I love you all.